Welcome to the Lift Heavy Run Long podcast. My name is Wilson Horrell and my co-host is Vaughn Rawls. You can find us at www.liftheavyrunlong.com or on Twitter and Instagram at LiftRunLong, or feel free to email me directly at wilson@liftheavyrunlong.com. The mission of LHRL is simply this: to inspire and be inspired. Tune in every week as we speak with some of the world's most interesting people. Enjoy the show and find your bliss. Welcome to the LHRL Podcast. This is episode 23. We are fortunate enough to have with us my newfound friend, Ms. Sam Turco. How you doing,
Hello.
Sam?
I am good.
There's a lot that I want to know about you. You're an interesting person. I know that you finished a 100-mile race. Did I read correctly that you're doing a 150-mile race?
Yeah. So next April, I think Scott and I brought this up on our show to you because it's downstate Illinois. So we thought you might want to come join the fun. But it's called the McNaughton Park 150, and the race is offered in a 50, 100, 150, and 200-mile distance.
When is that?
It's in April. I think it's the first weekend in April to 2017.
Well, I met Sam through the 10 Junk Miles podcast. Sam originally contacted me and invited me to be a guest on their show. And I read on their website, it's probably the funniest introduction to four people that I've ever read. And so if you get a chance, to any of our listeners, go to 10junkmiles.com, read the about page, and on top of just brightening your day, you'll have to listen to the podcast. And the podcast is really excellent. I really enjoy listening to it.
Thank you. I can't take any credit for the intro and bios on the website, but they are pretty funny.
Well, you're a vital part of the podcast, and that's just as good as the intro.
Thank you. So it's been very, very fun.
Well, on this episode, we're going to learn everything about you, everything good and bad that you've ever done in your life. I'm like a priest. You have
like
to come clean.
It's like a free therapy session.
That's right. So you have to come clean, and we're going to know if you're not telling the truth.
All right.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself growing up. Start from the beginning.
Sure. I grew up in upstate New York, a small town called Saratoga Springs. It's about 3 hours north of New York City, 3 hours south of Montreal, and 3 hours west of Boston. I was an only child for the first 10 years of my life, and then my parents had my sister. But growing up, I was, never very good at sports, always kind of awkward. It didn't really occur to me to start running until I had to.
At what point did you have to?
Not until college, I would say. I was on the rowing team for a few years in high school, and again, not really built for that kind of thing. I'm 5'2" and barely weighed 120 pounds. So I think it was, more of a wake-up call when I got to college, and, you start to party and eat whatever you want. And couple years in there, I really started walking around campus. I went to school in Worcester, Massachusetts at Holy Cross, and it's super hilly. So then started kind of running, and then did eventually get to a point where I ran my first half marathon my sophomore year. I think someone convinced me to do it, and they claimed a group was doing it, and then I ended up being the only person doing it. But I'll never, ever forget that feeling. It's something I never thought I could have ever done. And it's cool to look back there and see kind of where I am now.
Well, when you got started doing it, what did that first day look like? Did you wake up in a terrible hangover and decide I'm going to go for a jog or I'm going to go for a run? How did it morph into doing nothing to going to where you are now?
Yeah, my parents were always really active. So it's always something that I thought, even when I wasn't doing it regularly, I thought I should be. that makes sense. Like there was always kind of a guilt or something in the back of my mind if and when I wasn't doing anything active or doing anything to better myself in that sense.
Because your parents are always doing things to better themselves? Is that
they
what you're
were,
saying?
yeah. Growing up, my dad used to run. He's big into cycling. He's always doing something. My mom ran 6 marathons when I was in between the time that I was, a toddler and graduated from high school. Where I went to school was very, it's a private liberal arts college. So you can imagine the population of students there was, mostly from the East Coast, mostly middle to upper middle class. So there was a consciousness with being active, I think, associated with with that demographic. Not really a secret. And then eventually it even just getting out there for, I think, even when I was just walking an hour 5 days a week, it becomes something that is really, I think, a good part of your day.
So is that why you said you kind of felt like you had to start running, just because the people around you and everybody was doing something like that, so you felt like you had to?
Oh yeah, I meant that, and then I think the fact that I gained like 20 pounds my freshman year probably helped.
That'll do
it. That'll definitely do it. And at the time, my parents were getting divorced, the stress of college, and it did, like I said, become a really important part of my day to get out there and kind of turn everything else off for an hour. And then it really was, I think, signing up for that first half marathon to try to get my butt into gear, to run a little bit more.
And at the time, signing up for a half marathon to you just seemed ridiculous. Like that was completely nuts for you to sign up for a race that distance.
Oh, it was crazy. I don't think that I had ever run anything longer than 4 miles at that time. So it was really cool and really exciting. And I was so scared, so scared that I wasn't going to finish. I mean, we all remember that feeling. You guys have run ultras too, but to look back on that first race of distance significance, it's pretty cool to kind of reflect on how you felt. But oh yeah, I was really scared that I wasn't going to make it.
How long did it take you in between walking and deciding that you were going to run a half marathon until your first half marathon?
Yeah, the half marathon was March 2010. And I was probably up to walk running in that fall. So I would say like December to March, I really trained, and really it put, signing up for that race pushed me to ramp up the running part. But I think the longest, I maybe ran 7 or 8 miles as my longest run. But someone said to me, if you can run for an hour, then you could finish that race. Needless to say, my training was there, but it wasn't really spot on in any way.
Yeah, I don't know that there is a spot on, and that's interesting. You interest me because of your casual style of running, and the fact that you truly believe that anybody that wants to run ultras or run long distances can run long distances.
Yeah, I do. And unless you have some type of debilitating injury that's preventing you, I truly, truly believe that.
Majority of it is in your mind, believing that you can do it and just telling yourself to keep going. I always say that's probably a bigger part of it than actual running.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree.
Did you have people telling you that it was a mistake, you're going to hurt yourself, you need to follow this specific plan, or else you shouldn't be running?
I had a couple of friends who no one said that outright, but I did have a few friends that were on the cross country team at Holy Cross where I went to school. Their reaction when I said, I think the longest I've run is 8 miles preparing for it, was kind of like, okay, are you sure that you really want to try this? And to be fair, I think I did for the last 3 miles of that first half marathon, I did a fair amount of walking and, jogging. That was painful. I guess I was prepared to finish, but not prepared to finish feeling good. And I think that's now played into my running, looking back on that. It's different when you attempt a new distance, but I would say now anything up to 50 miles, my goal is to finish and feel like I haven't totally hit a wall or crapped out, or that I'm going to hurt myself if I take one more step. Obviously there's pain involved, but that was a big part of my goal, even for the 100, to train strong enough to not feel like I was chasing cutoffs or something like that.
When you finish the half marathon, what is your thought process from there? Are you going immediately to marathon, or are you thinking more along the lines of I finished this and I'm done?
No, I didn't think that far in advance because I was like 19 years old and a sophomore in college. So I think I just wanted to
go home, get drunk.
Go home and have a couple of beers. Yeah. And I actually think after that race, I just, between finishing out the school year and getting caught up in college stuff, I think I took a couple months off of running. I didn't totally ramp up to the point where I was running like 5 days a week consistently until the summer going into my senior year of college. So, for all intents and purposes of this conversation, we can basically say I stopped running for like a year and a half after that first race. And it didn't even really cross my mind. I never thought, I should get back into that so I can do another race. And it wasn't because I hated it so much. I think I just prioritized other things.
It's easy to stop running and not realize that you've really stopped running.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. You stop for a week and think, I'll get back into it eventually. And then exactly a year and a half later, it's hard to get back out there again. But time flies.
Time flies when you're avoiding stuff that you're supposed to be doing.
Exactly.
I recently went to the gym. My wife and I had gone on vacation, and after I got back from vacation, I guess I took a little vacation from that vacation. And then when I showed back up, people were like, "Wow, where you been? It's good to see you." It's like I'm meeting people all over again. And I'm telling myself, I haven't been gone that long, but I had been.
Yeah. No, even with the recovery from the 100-miler, I started to taper out my strength training 2 or 3 weeks before that, and then didn't get back to the gym until like 2 or 3. So it was like 6 weeks that I hadn't picked up a weight around the 100. And people at the gym exactly are saying, "What's up? Where have you been?" But
when did strength training become part of your regimen?
Yeah, so this is huge, and this is part of what brought me to you guys. I moved to Chicago after I graduated from Holy Cross. That was May of 2012. I was here by June 2012, and I learned the city by running it, which I love. I love doing that when I go on vacation to places, and I decided in the fall of 2012 to run my first full marathon. I think a lot of people were training for the Chicago Marathon all summer, and I couldn't get into it at that point because, you have to get in by like January. The race is in the following October. But I ran the Monumental in Indianapolis, and it was okay. It was like a 10-minute mile. It felt really shitty. And then I think after I started to do the like boot camp style classes at my gym, so mostly light hand weights, but a lot of plyometrics and push-ups and burpees and all that stuff. And I had never done that before, and that for the first 6 months of doing that, just my body hurt every day. I was just sore and tired, but it felt good, and I noticed that my running was improving. So it became a really, really, really big part of all my training, and has been since. So it's now been almost 4 years. And I've progressed from those classes and dabbled a little bit in heavier lifting, but I don't know that my running has gotten tremendously better and stronger, and I've gotten faster, and I sincerely don't think it would be unless I added the strength component in.
So from the marathon, you finish your marathon, you start doing strength training, and then you decide to ramp it up to what, a 50K, 50 miler?
So not necessarily.
You're not repeating any of these races. You're going straight from half marathon, and moving on up.
I wasn't thinking ahead as far as long-term goals, mostly because I don't think that I gave myself credit to try to do that. I didn't really start to feel confident in my ability to train and improve until my second marathon, where I think it wasn't even that much, but I shaved like 20 minutes off of my first marathon time. But the difference was that I felt good running the whole time. I felt really strong.
That's a shitload of time. 20 minutes is a ton.
Yeah.
Of time.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah. But that first year, I did a bunch of half marathons, and I started to really enjoy running those faster. Did a couple of full marathons, and then I did decide that year to ramp up to try to run a 50 miler.
What is that with people wanting to belittle their progress? You saying, yeah, I didn't do it. I walked a lot, and then I did, it wasn't very fast. It was like a 10-minute mile. And then, I didn't shave off much, but it's only 20 minutes. And this is from somebody who just stated that they were unathletic in high school and thought it was beyond their wildest dreams to ever run a half marathon. And here you are doing marathons in close to 4 hours, and you're still not good enough.
I know. I don't know if that's just the way that I am, which is a blessing and a curse, because I'm sure some of your listeners, it'll come across as pace shaming or not, thinking, it could translate to me judging other people's success.
I don't hear that at all.
Paces and time. So I really hope that that's not it. I don't know.
That's not what I hear at all.
Well, good, because I don't want it to come across that way. I think I just, there's always someone doing it a little bit better and a little bit faster, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. My aim is it's never really been competitive, if that makes sense.
I think that's normal. I think that the better we get and the more we accomplish, we just want to do better. And so that's the way we look at it sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think that you reach a point where you're talking about being stronger or faster or better. I think that we can reach a point in our running where no one can be any more me-er. No one, I run the way that I run, and that's just, I'm going to pay my fee. And once I'm in the race, then it's my race, and it belongs to me as much as it belongs to anybody else out there.
I think so. And I think as a person, I tend to avoid confrontation, avoid conflict. So that translates to avoiding competition, or, even I like that, you can't become more mere. I think keeping a race or keeping an accomplishment about you, it takes away an element that could make it more stressful and could really take away from the overall experience. And running, especially, and lifting, they're so individual that it's okay, and it's actually sometimes a little bit more special if it's your thing, your accomplishment, your personal best.
Well, I think it's good for our listeners to hear people like you equally, if not more so than it is for them to hear the real competitors, because I think it's important for everyone to realize that that's just how people feel. People feel down on themselves. People feel like they can't do things, but then people go out and attempt these things, and they work through that. They work past that. And there's far more people who are afraid to get out there and do it than there are people out there doing it.
I think so. And that's where LHRL and 10 Dunk Miles intersect. Scott started the show to be, we're not going to interview the person who won Western States because they're being interviewed on 10 other podcasts. And a lot of, there's, especially in the ultra world, it's not like they're at the same level as Usain Bolt or anything like that, but it's still, we are people who do this for a hobby. This isn't a profession. And, the story about the guy who was a former alcoholic drug addict and 5 years later was able to run his first 50 miler is much more interesting than, someone who's been like a competitive athlete their whole life and picked up ultra running. So we're totally on the same page with you about that. And I agree. I think, hearing average people like us on our podcast, we've gotten a lot of really positive feedback from listeners who, have ramped up and are even, attempting their first marathon or 50K or something. And that's really, really cool. It's this whole thing about if I can do it, you can do it.
Yeah. And I think it's important to embrace that. I think it's important to embrace where you start in relation to where you are. I tell people all the time that I'm fortunate to have started so far behind because I don't know what it's like to run a 3.5 hour marathon. I don't know what it's like to run a 4 hour marathon. So therefore, if I'm running a 4 hour marathon and I run a 4:05 marathon, I'm beating myself up over that. Having such slow times, the only place I really go is up or stay still or, within, it just doesn't really make any difference because the finish line is still as much fun. It's probably more fun if you finish last than if you finish first.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
So when did you find the trail? Or you're more of a trail runner than you are a road runner?
Sort of. I'll qualify it. I was afraid of the trails until even, I would say, a little over a year ago. I would tend to look for ultras that were either on roads or on kind of flat railroad grade trails, nothing super technical. I don't know why, they made me nervous. I was just used to training on pavement. And frankly, I do most of my training on pavement still. I live in the city and I have a car, so I can drive out to the trails here, but there's something about being in a car for longer than you'll be running potentially that kind of irks me. So no, I do most of my training on pavement. However, now when I look for a race, particularly an ultra, I would do trails. There's something about the natural flow of a trail that I think just lends itself to being able to pace yourself a little bit better at that distance. Plus, what beats being out there in the woods? It's just awesome.
So where did you find yourself going from back to the marathon distance? Where did you find yourself going from there? What was your next goal?
So I was training for my third marathon, and I think a lot of people around me living in Chicago were also, we were all training for the Chicago Marathon. And then we have a race here called the Lakefront 50-50. So there's a 50K offered and a 50 miler offered. It's all on pavement. It's on the lakefront, the trail that I train on every day. I'd heard about the 50 miler from a friend whose sister was into running. And I thought, that sounds crazy. I'm not very fast, but maybe I could kick it up a notch by running this distance. Training, you guys have run marathons. You can put a lot of pressure on yourself to finish at a certain time. And that's pressure that is very uncomfortable for me. So it made more sense for me to, like I said, kind of kick it up a notch by going the next distance. And the 50K, I love the 50K distance. I really do. But it seemed, not that much more, especially since the race was on pavement, than to just go run another marathon. So I piggybacked my training for the marathon with a little bit extra to get in the mileage before the ultra. And this is where I think the strength training really made a difference. Just that extra stuff, doing an extra half an hour here and there of work on top of the set marathon training schedule was almost enough. I really think that, and you guys can attest to this too. I mean, when you're following an LHRL ultra training program, you know, you're running what, like 3 to 4 days a week sometimes, and then you have the strength component. So I think the mix of stuff was key.
Were you following anything structured, or are you just throwing things in and doing whatever you want?
With strength, there was no structure. At that point, I was still doing the 1 hour boot camp or, you know, core classes at my gym 4 days a week. And then for the running component, I think I basically followed a pretty straightforward marathon training program that I found on the internet for the Chicago Marathon. And then the Brian Powell's book, Relentless Forward Progress, I used as sort of a framework for what my second medium long run of the weekend should be. So that's when I started to kind of adopt the back-to-back weekend long run approach.
What kind of distance is your weekend long run?
Going into the first 50, I think I would do 16 to 20 mile Saturday run, and then something like maybe 10 or 12 on Sunday. So 4 hours, 3 hours, or 3 hours, 3 hours, or 3 hours, 2 hours. I think just something beyond just an hour out there, you know, even to get out for an hour and a half on that second day, I think is perfectly enough and acceptable. It's almost more, it gets, I'm sure, to a point where it's more mental or just more about time spent on your feet over the course of a weekend.
Well, so you finish your 50 miler, and then what are your thoughts from there? Aside from, I'll never run again.
I look back, I'm like, I never want to go do that race again, because it was like 4 12.5 mile loops on pavement, which to me now sounds so unappealing and mentally hard because it's so monotonous.
It sounds painful.
Yeah, I know, right? You know, at that point, even, I don't think I knew I probably wanted to do another 50 miler, but I wasn't like Google searching when that would be. I think I had maybe even at that point thought maybe I'll do that same one again next year, because at that point I wasn't really looking. I hadn't joined. We have an ultra marathon Facebook group in Chicago called the Flatlanders. So at that point I hadn't joined the Flatlanders. I didn't try to make any ultra running friends. So I didn't really know what else was out there. I knew the 100-mile distance existed because I read about it in Relentless Forward Progress. But at that point, that was so not an aspiration of mine. I think I just, again, even at that point, wasn't necessarily a planner as really, really long-term about my running goals. I think it was, something that I didn't really think about until a couple months before a race, kind of the idea popping in my mind, which makes me think, something that has been pretty consistent and important to me that I think will resonate with some of your listeners is that overall fitness for life, which lends itself to preparedness to, I think, do some of these races sort of on a whim, is more important to me, or was more important to me for a long time than setting a long-term goal and moving towards it, if that makes sense. And I think a lot of factors come into play there, but that I won't get into. Some people do like ultra slams where they do 500-mile races in a year. And that's something that I don't want to sacrifice my ability to get a good workout in daily, feeling good daily, weekly, monthly, because I need to be in a constant state of recovery. So that definitely factored into that first, I was enjoying where I was as far as, running pretty consistently. And it was more about, we'll see what happens and we'll see how I'm feeling 2 months or a month out from a race, and then I'll sign up.
I think there's a lot of truth in what you said. And yes, I think it will resonate with our listeners that the act of just getting out there and trying to get fit that is the goal.
Yeah.
And doing the long races and reaching those benchmarks, that's wonderful and that's fantastic. And you get all the good feels from that. But that is really just a byproduct of everything that you're doing and sort of putting on display all of your hard work. But at the end of the day, the important part is getting out there and moving around so that you can live a fulfilled life.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
So you get into the 100-mile distance, and how does you're leading up to that race? Are you following a pretty stringent schedule, or are you just running?
Yeah, so I ran the first 50 was in fall 2013, and the 100 was in spring 2016. So there was time there in between for me to come to the 100-mile goal. And a lot of that was
that's not a whole lot of time to come to it, is it? I mean, I'm no mathematician, but what is that? 5-6 months?
Oh, no. It was about 2.5 years between my first 50 and yeah. Big part of it was I did start to put myself out there, and I joined the Flatlander Ultra Runners Facebook group, and I had goals to just really wanted to do another 50 miler in 2014. And then even in end of 2015 is when I knew I wanted to do a 100 miler, and I attempted one in December 2015. And my mind just, I think I physically could have done it. I put in the training, but my brain just kind of wasn't there. And I think at that point, I still didn't really have, I knew some folks, but I was part of the Facebook group in Chicago, but I didn't really go to any of the group runs. I didn't put myself out there to actually make friends, which, as you guys know, with your box and with your local ultra running community, that is so important. Looking back, I don't even know how I thought I could. I went into my first 100 miler, no pacer. I didn't know a single person there. It was just, it felt kind of sad and lonely.
You're just there by yourself.
Getting to the start that day. Yeah. And there are times when I can be very internally motivated, but it just wasn't happening that day. So to answer your question, Wilson, my initial goal this past spring was to qualify for Boston. I wasn't following a training plan for a 100. That being said, the back-to-back weekend long runs became really, I think, determined the flow of my weekend, starting even coming back to the training for that first 50. I liked it so much. I liked getting out there for a couple hours each day. So I was doing the marathon training program, but then, supplementing with another extra long run on Sunday because I liked it. And then that's around the same time that I started doing 10 junk miles, and I made friends that were doing crazy races like the 150 and 200 mile distance, and someone convinced me to ditch my marathon goal and attempt 100.
You said putting yourself out there and made clear how important that is. That's really the only thing there is for me in running. I mean, I run because there's a fun group of people out there to run with, but the people showing up and having the people and knowing that you're going to get to pass people at the starting line is fun. Getting together with them is fun. Knowing that you're going to meet them on their way back and you're going to see them at the finish line and all that sort of thing. That's as much fun to me as any of the running is.
Yeah. And I think especially with ultras, because the races are so small and kind of casual, and the vibe is so conducive to exactly what you just said. Just, you're doing a little bit of running, but a lot of hanging out with friends and meeting cool people.
Well, that brings me to the question of how did you meet the people at 10 Junk Miles? That's a fun crew. That's an interesting mix of people that you have people that run for time, people that run distance, and people that just like to have a good time. How did you fall in line with those bunch of heathens?
Sure. I know. I had made a couple of friends from going to a few of the basically meetups at our local trail last fall. And one of them is Amy Briggs, and she was the female co-host before I started. But she moved to Colorado, as a lot of people from Chicago who are into endurance sports eventually do. And I actually, frankly, hadn't really listened to 10 Junk Miles. I listened to a couple, but I sort of knew what it was. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, I got a message from Scott Coomer, who started the podcast, and said, Amy said that you might be pretty good. And frankly, I think it's because I have no children and I live in the city, so it's convenient. There's nothing.
You might be pretty available.
I'm available, exactly. I was excited, and I kind of thought, go do one. That's what he meant, like come be on it one time. And I didn't really know why, because at that point I wasn't even really training for my first 100 milers. I was questioning what I had to offer to the podcast, but and then it's kind of stuck. So it's just been a few months since mid-March, but it's been a ton of fun and really snowball. To get personal for a minute, I started to put myself out there, and I of course made friends with the guys on the show, and then started to go with them to some of the group runs and made friends from there. And I was kind of stuck before that, socially and personally. I think holding on to friendships and relationships from college, and I felt that I know that starting to have running be more of a social part of my life was the push I needed to make some really good changes personally, and start to look for friends that I had more in common with. So, the past several months have been a good lesson in outgrowing friendships and relationships and moving on and how to do that. And it can be kind of clumsy, but it's been a kind of a crazy domino effect. And the first domino to drop was me joining 10 Junk Miles.
Yeah, I think there's a good lesson in that. I think there's a good
Yeah.
lesson in just, like you said, putting yourself out there and letting everything else take care of itself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because it is a domino effect. You get to know one person at a race, and they know a few people, and the next thing you know, you're shaking hands and slapping high fives with everybody there.
Yeah, so true.
Has running carried into your personal life and improved your career?
Yeah. First and foremost, it's for me, and for my stress, and it is a healthy way to deal with things like stress and anxiety. And that's, I think, part of why I started being active in the first place, and part of why I think, looking back to when I picked up my running again, going into my senior year of college. So to answer, yes, 1,000 times yes. I couldn't imagine my life without it.
So what is next for you? Tell me about the 150-mile race.
Sure. Well, next, and this is more uncomfortable to me than tackling the 150, because as we covered a couple minutes ago, I'm naturally not competitive and not inclined to train to run fast or put pressure on myself in that way. So I'm going against that, and trying to qualify for Boston here in about 4 weeks. I'm feeling confident about my training.
What's your qualifying time?
It's 3:35. So I'll shoot for a 3:30 just to be safe, because, I think a 3:35 doesn't necessarily get you there these days. And so between,
what does that boil down to as far as a minute per mile?
About an 8-minute mile.
Golly.
Right? I'd have the same reaction, and I'm making myself do it. So we'll see. From there, I have a couple months where I can kind of mess around a little bit before I have to ramp up my training for the 150. So I'm looking forward to that. Actually, I'm looking forward to having October, November, and December to sort of take a mental break from any type of training. I'll still run, and I'll still work out, but I'm hoping, I've got a couple trips planned And I think, it's important for your listeners to, to understand me as a person, to know that I'm like the laziest active person on the planet. Like I think
Amen.
I don't think I moved from the couch yesterday for longer than 2 hours, but anyway.
I think Wilson and I can give you a run on that one.
Yeah, don't go claiming superiority on us in that category.
So to that point, I'm looking forward to having a few relaxed months before kicking it up probably the first week in January to really ramp up my miles for the 150.
I don't have any idea, having never done anything like that, but I would assume when you're getting up to 150-mile races, your mental strength has to be more in check than anything else.
Yeah. And so one of the things that friends in particular, I became close friends with a couple named Chuck and Melissa going into the 100. They've both been guests on our show, but they've each finished a 200, races up to the 200-mile distance. And he's done ultra triathlons, and they're both just very good athletes. And they really have always said your training should be worse than the race. So that stuck with me. So it's just, it'll be getting to that point where the training is just really shitty. Mm-hmm. But I know, then, that race day will feel better than some of your hardest training weeks.
Well, and then you had mentioned to me, I'm not going to let you off the hook here, that you intend on deadlifting 300 pounds, correct?
That's a goal too. It's funny, that deadlift, but also I'd love to be able to do like more than one unassisted pull-up. So that's something I could definitely be better about, abiding by a more structured strength training program, or, even working with a trainer a few times. But yeah, I've really come to love the strength training part. I think I could get there.
I find that the strength training part and the running part sort of ebb and flow and take care of themselves. If I let it, I'll get focused on squats, and that's what I want to do forever. And then in a month, I'll be hooked on deadlift, and that's what I want to do forever. And then a month later, I'm all into running again. And I think that's it's good to have that to fall back on, because otherwise, if all I did was run or all I did was squat, eventually I'm going to get tired of it. And the next floor that I get off on is the couch.
Yeah.
So I need to have different places to run to and things to fall back on.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it too. I've never thought of the strength training, at least sort of piece by piece like that, perfecting something. And maybe I should entertain that idea. I like that. Well,
be careful about entertaining any of my ideas. I don't know that I meant that to be so profound as I meant it to be just that I'm incredibly lazy and I have to be vigilant about staying active in some form or fashion, or else there's either a lot of activity or there's not shit. Either I'm doing it all, or I'm not doing nothing.
Yeah. I will say that, unfortunately, and this, every body is different. I have found that my attempts to lift a little bit heavier are kind of on pause during the thick of my marathon training. Just the speed work and heavy lifting I've tried it a couple weeks, and the recovery was not great. So rather than risk hurting myself or hindering my speed goal, I've sort of put the heavy stuff on hold. But that'll be a big part of my 150 training. We don't have hills in Chicago, so squats and deadlifts become a way to supplement any type of hill or, you know, climbing work that might go into some of these ultras.
Well, I'm excited to keep up with you on your journey there. And listen, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on here and speak with us. I think
Thank you for having me. It's fun.
I think that you and your people and your tribe are about as good as they get. And I think that your attitude is very important to the sport, to the hobby, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think it's great that you inform people that you don't have to be a lifelong athlete to enjoy a life of being athletic. And wow, that sounded pretty damn profound right there.
I was going to say that quote right there, man.
Yeah, we need that on a pillow, and, you know, we'll sell that on our websites and split the profit.
We need it on a pillow so we can lay on the couch and read it.
Well, yeah, exactly.
So really, I think a lot of you and your podcast at 10 Miles, and I'm going to continue following you guys and bugging you guys, and I hope that we can work together any way that we can.
We will too.
And stay together and have some fun and meet up at some races. Oh yeah,
I would love. We definitely have to make that a priority. Maybe if not for this year, then next year. And you guys too. I can't wait. I'm loving the podcast and can't wait to see what you guys do. You're a great. You know, you guys are about as good as it gets. So thank you so much for having me on.
I appreciate it very much. And I want you to go out there and have an awesome day and an awesome week.
Yeah, you guys will seize this post-vacation week as best we can.
That's right.
All right.
All right. Take care, Sam.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.